few weeks ago, I was running a workshop with a room full of HR leaders, experienced people, smart people. And I asked them, when it comes to AI in your HR work, are you renovating or are you building from scratch? And almost everyone said renovating. That was the most honest answer I've heard in a long time. And today, that's the conversation I want to have. Not the aspirational version of AI transformation, the real one. The one that has to survive a CFO, a reluctant executive team, and a workforce that has heard too many change announcements already. And my guest today is Malvika Jethmalani, three-time CHRO, founder of the Atvis Group, and someone whose perspective I genuinely trust because she has been in the room when these decisions get made and when they fall apart. Today, Malvika and I are going to take real HR use cases and work through them together. We are going to push each other, and through our conversation and banter, we are hoping that it'll give you some aha moments to think about. Malvika, I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you. So, welcome to Tides, and thank you for giving me your time again today.
Thank you. And thanks for having me back.
So, Malvika, you've been very active in the AI space. I think anything new that comes out in the AI space, I know I have to go look up what Malvika's take on this is. And the best part is that you have had the CHRO hat for a number of organizations for a number of years. So before we dive into, picking up use cases and hashing them, I would love to hear from you, from your perspective, when someone pitches you an AI solution for an HR process, what is the first thing that you're actually thinking?
The first thing that comes to my mind is, what problem does this really solve? What business problem does this really solve? And are we ready to solve that problem in this moment? Because there's lots of AI solutions out there that solve great and important business problems, but the timing is not right for every organization. Not every organization may be ready to solve that business problem or may have acknowledged that that is a problem worth solving. So CHROs know that AI is hot. They probably get approached by multiple vendors daily with various AI solutions. But I think the focus for me especially is on practicality. So I want to see a clear link to business goals. I want to see a believable ROI, and I want assurance that the people and the data within the organization can support it. So there was a recent survey done by the CHRO Association that found that top CHRO concerns are leadership adoption and skills/upskilling. So it's not just about the tech itself. And so what I mean in practical terms is, I would ask, does this AI solution improve retention, engagement, or some type of business metric, productivity, etc.? Can we measure the impact, the before and the after? Who will own it? And do we have clean data? Do we have AI-ready data? And do we have at least some assurance about data security and privacy? And so, in short, for me, and I think for a lot of other CHROs, it would be about alignment with the business strategy and business goals, organizational readiness, and then risk and governance.
Fantastic. And do you think from your experience, the HR team would be used to coming up with a solution which addresses the business problem, the organizational readiness piece, and the things that you're expecting as CHRO? Or is this some thing like a new skill that they have to acquire to even pitch an idea, frame an idea, and present it for buy-in?
I think there is a fraction of the CHROs out there who do understand and do have that skill. But I think a lot of CHROs and HR leaders don't. And I can tell you that just based on my own experience. I work mostly with small to medium-sized companies, mostly private equity backed. And I don't see a lot of senior HR leaders and CHROs who understand their company's P&L inside and out. I think that's very important for a CHRO. I don't see a lot of CHROs who can explain to me how their company makes money or who their top customers are and what is top of mind for them, Or what does their competitive landscape look like? And the reason I bring up those things is those are business acumen skills. Unless you have those business acumen skills, unless you have the data literacy, it becomes extremely difficult to create and sell a compelling business case to your CEO and CFO and other members of the leadership team.
Yeah.
So I think what I would do if I were an AI vendor or strategist, or if I was bringing an AI solution to CHROs, is I would actually try to understand their business first. And I would even advise them on what they should be looking for in a good AI solution. What does good look like? Not just in terms of driving the business impact, that's the obvious thing, but what should they look for in terms of a human-centered AI solution that keeps their people at the center of things? And what should they look for from a risk and governance perspective? And then from there, how can they create and sell a really compelling business case? So I would come to the table with that advisory mindset, helping them every step of the way, not just implementing the solution, but even selling the solution to the leadership team in the first place.
Absolutely. And I think in that kind of business acumen for a chief people officer or chief human resource officer is even more critical with AI in the mix, because AI has the potential to, we've talked about it in many of our previous conversations, both online and offline, that it has the potential to completely rewire organizational anatomy. And when I say organizational anatomy, I'm not just saying ways of working in an organization. But to your point, what is the business model? Where is the business going? How is the business making money? What is the impact of consumer behavior change on how an organization provides value to its customer? And if we start thinking from there, then connecting all the pieces that HR has to do to that makes integration and adoption much more simpler in the organization. And I also feel like, to your point, that if a CHRO or an HR executive or leader is not able to connect, they might not be an expert in AI, is where I'm going. But if they are not able to connect that business value for their team, how is the rest of the team going to come to the CHRO saying, here's the business problem that's worth solving? So that's such a critical piece for a CHRO to address, for not just getting credibility with their peers and executives outside HR, but also to drive the vision for their HR team redesign, I would say.
Absolutely. And I think often, you and I assume that we were even talking about this offline, right? That people have the same level of knowledge and expertise as us. And very often they don't. I was just in a room with multiple senior HR leaders and CHROs a couple of weeks ago. And I would say probably 50% of them had not even implemented a responsible AI usage policy or an AI manifesto to help the organization, all the way from executives to the front lines, understand what is our approach to AI as an organization. And when do we want you to use AI? When do we not want you to use AI? Many of them had not even thought about that or had that conversation with their leadership team and their employees. And I was not going to have that conversation with them because I assumed that they would have already been past that point. Such is the reality. And so I think some of us too, who are on this other side, this advisory side, have to remind ourselves that we need to question our own assumptions about what people should have done by now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this also speaks to the fact that what we are witnessing with AI is truly unprecedented in scope, size, scale, and speed. Like the things in the AI space are evolving at such a ferocious speed that you blink and things change. So keeping a pulse on what's changing from a technology perspective, not just from the perspective of which tools do I integrate, but how it's impacting the business model, and everything else starts from there. And this is where I feel like we can't think about AI just as like a broad stroke conversation around AI as a tool and a technology. And yes, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, all these large language models or frontier models, as some call them, have been great in the sense that it's a chat experience. But then it also has a negative side to it because we think about AI now. People who were not very well versed with AI, pre Gen AI era, are now seeing AI only in the chat experience. So when we think about integrating AI, it's through that lens of, oh, it's just a chatbot. How do I integrate that chatbot? And that's where I feel like there are three flavors of AI integration that organizations who are interested in integrating AI, both in their own workflow and supporting the broader organizational transformation, can think of. And I call it the 3A thinking lens. That when we are thinking about AI, let's think about AI as, where does it augment me as a human being? Where does it automate parts of my job tasks that don't make sense for me as a human to engage with, which are very black and white, which are repetitive, and there's no human value add that I'm doing in those tasks. And then the third piece, which AI has the potential of, which I feel like we've just started scratching the surface of in organizational contexts, is questioning, do we really need to do the work the same way that we've been doing it all these years to generate the same or new value, or should we be redesigning or re-architecting our ways of working? So that's 3A thinking lens that I bring to my conversations with my stakeholders who are interested in, we had Copilot for 3 years, but where do we go from here now? Like, I think that that's an easy way, a simple way for us to think about AI in different complexities and also look at problems that we are trying to solve with those three lenses, because augmentation is a low hanging fruit. You have access to like a chat bot and you're writing an email, AI helps you write a better email. Or you're writing a statement of work for a client, AI helps you write the statement of work better. Or you're creating a project plan, AI helps you create the project plan better, faster, quicker. That's augmentation. Automation, we've been on robotic process automation journey since digital transformation took foothold a couple of decades ago. You just automate. I do not want to scan 100 resumes that come in my workflow, filter them out and only show me 5. Automation. And adapt, again, is redesigning. And we'll get into these three. The reason why I'm painting a picture of this thinking lens is I would love to hear from your perspective, given your experience in HR, which of these three HR will gravitate most towards? Is it augment, automate, or adapt?
So the way I see it today, most of the current HR AI projects that are live fall, I think, under the automate and augment category or buckets. I don't think most HR organizations or organizations in general are rethinking their operating model and rethinking how work actually happens. And so in practice, companies might use AI to speed up or improve the existing tasks. So for example, you gave the recruiting example. Recruiting is a very common use case. Screening resumes, candidate outreach, even hiring manager outreach, and then onboarding once the offer letter is signed. There's a lot of interesting onboarding use cases. Another one is learning and development. So there's a lot of organizations that are starting to leverage AI in L&D and HR service delivery and even workforce analytics to some extent. So they're using AI to create content, for example, that in the past would have taken a long time. Or they're using AI to streamline routine work. So, for example, in one of my client projects, we created an HR chatbot, and that chatbot now answers employee queries about benefits, PTO, handbook policies, expenses, etc., versus the HR team getting all of those inquiries coming their way. I think adaptation is still adaptation, meaning redesigning the process end to end around AI. Is still rare. I would say most organizations are testing the waters by automating and augmenting first, and then sort of in being in wait and watch mode and learning from those experiments which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's sometimes easier to start small and use those smaller experiments to apply learnings to future bigger initiatives.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, we don't have to choose one over the other. I mean, but the art of adaptation and transformation for not just HR, for any department would be, where do I renovate, which is bolting AI onto an existing process so that it's more efficient, more faster, and the quality increases? And where do I architect a new solution? So those are the two mindsets that I also talk about when we are talking about transformation, that we can't always be thinking as a renovator. And what I mean by a renovator mindset is that, at the end of the day, when we call a renovator, they might make our existing house pretty, but we are still left with the existing house. Like, you can make you can make horses run faster to only a certain degree. After a while, if you are just putting all your energy towards making the horse run faster, by the time the horse is running faster, you might realize there's no demand for a faster horse, right? So that's why there needs to be a balance between, where do I renovate versus where do I architect? Where do I think about it from a perspective of what I call zero based design thinking, where it's a blank slate. Let's just put everything on the side. Here's a problem that we need to solve for. How will we go about solving that problem now that we know what is the potential of AI and where AI can really truly help solve it better, not in the traditional sense? So one is bolting AI onto an existing thing. The other is redesigning with AI in the mix from the get-go. Having said that, I think my lived experience also says that yes, HR is gravitating more towards augmentation and automation also, in the sense that I'll just buy a tool that takes care of me, takes care of this particular thing for me. Not like, let me partner with the IT team and see how we can really truly automate certain pieces. There's complexity and depth in automation as well. Having said that, where I'm going with this is, why is it that HR is gravitating more towards augmentation and automation and not towards adaptation? Is it a skill issue? Is it an awareness issue, knowledge issue? Or are there other things that HR people, leaders, executives have to deal with, which are hidden, which are not known? Because right now, if somebody is looking at HR from an outsider perspective, they'll be like, they're not risk takers, they're not innovators. But I don't buy that argument, because fundamentally, all humans are creative beings. And we all know, if we are working in a process day in and day out, what's working, what's not working. And we would like to make life easier for us as well. So, what is the reality like on that side of the house, especially from a CHRO's perspective?
I think there are a couple of real obstacles. I think the number one thing is CHROs today are incredibly, incredibly overwhelmed and overworked. And I understand it. I've been in that seat, right? They are just in the past 5 to 6 years alone, CHROs have had to deal with the global pandemic and getting everyone working from home overnight and then bringing people back into the office and dealing with the fallout of that and the employee engagement issues from that, dealing with the employee pushback. They've had to deal with geopolitical tension and war and the effects of those things on their employees. They've had to deal with climate disasters. They've had to deal with sociopolitical issues and now AI. And AI is disrupting almost every function and every aspect of how we work and how work gets done. And so, with all of that background and context, I can see why it would be easier to stop at the automate or even the augment option and check the box and say, okay, we implemented AI. We're done, right? We brought in an AI solution and now we can say that we are an AI powered HR shop. Because the redesigning of the work, it takes a lot of work and effort, but it's also a risk for a lot of CHROs. And CHROs are already often having to be the adult in the room, having to deliver bad news, having to say, no, we're not doing that, or no, that's a compliance issue, or no, that's a regulatory issue, or no, that's going to have a negative impact on employee experience, et cetera, et cetera. They're the ones having to push managers to make hard decisions sometimes. And so, on top of that, deploying AI throughout the organization and leading an org wide AI transformation can be risky from a political capital perspective and a social capital perspective. So, one kind of real life case study that I loved reading about was the CHRO of IBM recently did an interview, and she talked about how they led their AI transformation. And it was three things. So first, she said, you have to be willing to fix or eliminate processes before you even apply AI. To you and me, it sounds obvious that if the process shouldn't exist, then AI won't save it. But in a lot of organizations, we know that people kind of hang on to the status quo, whether it's because it helps them feel like it protects their job more, or it helps them, sometimes hoard knowledge or hoard talent, whatever it may be. People have their own reasons, but these things do happen. The second thing she talks about is you need real behavior change, starting at the top, and you need leadership support. And so, one of the things that IBM did, which was pretty radical, is they forced adoption. They literally shut down access to traditional HR access points, and
Right.
everything was routed through the AI system. So people could kind of overnight no longer contact their HR partner. If they needed an answer to something, they had to go through this AI tool or AI system. And in the short term, it was incredibly painful for employees. Their ENPS score dropped from plus 19 to negative 35 overnight because suddenly HR was not available to help people. And so that type of radical change is not supported in most organizations. In fact, in a lot of organizations, leaders are very quick to point to HR when things don't go the right way, or when things don't go their way. So that was the second thing, is behavior change. And then the third thing she talks about is you have to redesign the operating model around the user, not around HR. So IBM, for example, they moved away from HR silos. They created cross-functional experts that focused on problems, not functions. And this is, by the way, coming back to my own experience, I'm hearing this more and more. So recently I was talking to a VP of HR in a large multi-billion-dollar consumer goods company. And she reports directly to the CHRO. So she's very senior. And she was telling me that they are now starting to experiment with flex teams. So they'll have a recruiter, an analyst, a people analytics person, a talent management person, et cetera. And they'll staff them on various projects, much like you would do in a consulting firm, based on what business problem needs to be solved. And so this sort of dynamic teaming, even within HR, is starting to become more and more common. And to sell that kind of model in to a regular CEO, not the CEO of IBM, who probably is more innovative and pushing the envelope anyway, but to sell that type of model to a regular PE-backed CEO who already has so many pressures on her or his head is incredibly difficult. So all of that is my roundabout way of saying that CHROs have a lot of pressures, and they also take on a lot of risk by introducing this type of redesigning work model, which is your adapt model.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought this up as an example for us to talk more about in depth, because this is the reality. I mean, you're 100% right. The IBM example looks really cool as a case study on paper. And if somebody's reading it, they might say that, oh, if IBM did it, let me try. And not just the CHRO, but an HR team might have access to it. And they're like, this is where the world is going. Let me also take the initiative and start selling it internally. And then the reality hits them and they're like, oh, nobody's listening to me. I'm not able to sell the idea. I'm not able to get buy in from the rest of the organization to support this idea. So it's not an easy journey. It looks very easy. and doable on paper. And behind the scenes, it's a very, very different picture and a extremely heavy lift for HR team to innovate with AI in the mix as we stand today. And I think, and you tell me if I'm off on this, part of it is because nobody expects innovation from HR. Part of it is because people who've been in HR haven't had to innovate and redesign for the longest time. You have standard processes. Payroll and benefit in one company will look more or less the same in another. Recruitment in one will look more or less the same in another. Like there are standard processes, there are standard ways of working, and you can, in I would say majority of cases, apply, you can lift one process from one company and deploy it in another without having to customize or make changes or drastic improvements. So it's been a very rinse and repeat kind of capability in organizations. And the third is the perception that HR has to deal with. Like HR is seen as the keep me out of jail department. I'm using monopoly example here because that's the genesis of HR. HR as a human resources department was for a CEO and a CFO to say, hey, look after people, make sure that there are no issues that spring up that have a negative impact on our business, on our brand, on our organization's perception. That was the genesis. I'm not saying that's how HR operates today, but if we go back to when HR was first introduced in organizational anatomy, that was where it started. So HR teams have to navigate that perception because if you come up to, let's say, a CFO saying, hey, I'll pick employee listening as an example, that most organizations do annual engagement surveys. Sometimes that annual engagement becomes once in 2 year engagement survey. And the survey is done, data is collected, and HR will spend immense amount of energy and effort making sense of all the data that's collected and then presented back to the executive team and people in the business. By the time they are presenting it to the business, a couple of things happen. The business context has changed and evolved since the survey was done. And two, getting leadership team in the business to act on the survey results is another heavy lift. So it's complicated. It's not an easy undertaking for HR. Let me ask you, how should HR navigate this? If somebody's inspired after hearing your IBM case study and they say, I'm also going to embark on this journey, how would you assess their readiness to embark on their journey, on this AI transformation journey? And where should they start?
In the IBM example, I believe so their CHRO is clearly someone who has great business acumen and is innovative and is willing to take risks, right? But in that example in particular, I think it worked because she had support from the CEO and the executive team. Now, it also helps that she's been there for a long time. I think she's been there for over 20 years, if I remember correctly. And so she's had time to sort of build that trust. So remember how I said their ENPS went from plus 19 to negative 35? Well, eventually it went up to positive 74. So it's at plus 74 now. But there was that real decline, and she needed support from the CEO and the rest of the leadership team through that process, right? It wouldn't have worked if the rest of them had turned around and said, HR, what are you doing? Right?
Yeah.
Like, remove the AI thing, go back to how things used to be, let people contact the HR business partners directly or whoever they were contacting to get answers in the past. And so I think the HR leader and the HR function needs a certain level of risk appetite, but also the business needs a certain risk appetite. And so the first place where I would start is I would start by assessing the risk appetite of my business. I would start by assessing how, yes, my CEO may be saying that they want me to build an AI powered function and they want AI powered talent management and workforce analytics, et cetera. But what does that really mean? And are they willing to invest not only the financial capital, but are they willing to invest the political and social capital to make an AI transformation like that happen at the enterprise level? And the other question I would ask myself is this an organization where the leadership team, including the CEO, is in the AI tools and using and incorporating AI into their day-to-day workflow. Because if they're not, then it becomes very difficult as a leadership team to try to convince people within your organization that they should use AI. But those of us who are at the top in the important jobs are not going to use AI. Right?
Mhm.
And it also then perpetuates this fear and anxiety about AI related job loss. So I would start there. I would start by assessing the risk appetite. And I would start by assessing, is my leadership team actually rolling up their sleeves and getting their hands dirty? Because if not, I would start there. And I would also ask myself, have we been clear with our employees about what is our approach to AI? So, what I mean by what is our approach to AI is, are we focused on efficiency AI, meaning we're going to do the same things we've been doing, but faster, better, cheaper with the help of AI? Or are we focused on opportunity AI? Meaning, are we going to use AI to rethink our entire business model? Are we going to use AI to rethink our product roadmap or how we serve customers better or how we improve the employee experience, et cetera, right?
Mhm.
So in other words, are we the type of company that's saying, let's bring in the AI agents and figure out how we can cut our headcount from 100 to 80? Or are we the type of company that's going to ask ourselves, how can we use AI to get the same level of business outcomes and impact from a 100-person team that we would have from a 200-person team? You see how those two mindsets lead you to very different paths in terms of how you approach your AI transformation and your business model. So I would start there and ask myself, have we figured that out as a leadership team? Are we going down the efficiency AI or opportunity AI path, or both,
Yeah.
if that's right for your organization? And have we clearly communicated that to employees and including to middle managers? Because we will need them. We will need to bring them along on this journey. So those are a couple of places where I would start.
100%. And I would add a third one here, Malvika, that a CHRO or an HR executive doesn't have to be solving all the problems on their own. As they're looking at what does my organizational readiness looks like, what does the landscape of my stakeholders looks like, who's ready, where, when, and how, and managing all the relationship side of things, they can also have a clear vision for their own HR team to say, hey, you have the permission to look at how do we solve these problems? How do we innovate and adapt the processes to meet the business needs? Because what I feel is like people sometimes need permission to innovate. And a CHRO giving that permission to their team would be such a cool place to be in, because if the team is looking at where are the problems, how do we solve the problems, and the CHRO and their leadership team is looking at how do I manage the political landscape, for lack of better term, to get buy-in and assess readiness, I think the whole team is marching towards a mission versus CHRO having to do the heavy lift on their own. And the team is still working in the old processes, trying to bolt AI onto existing systems. And I think data plays a really cool role. I mean, imagine if the HR team has the real data and insights and connected to business problems, would be a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely. And you said something earlier that I want to underline, which is that part of the issue is people don't expect HR to innovate. And
Mhm.
not only do they not expect HR to innovate, they actually get uncomfortable when HR starts to innovate. I coach a lot of CHROs and senior HR leaders, as you know. And as I said earlier, many of them don't have the business acumen, et cetera. So we have to work on that. But the few that do, and the few that want to innovate and that want to lead AI transformation and redesign work and all of that are often told, stay in your lane, stay in
Mm.
your lane, you're HR, stay in your lane, right? You're the party planner, you're the
Yeah.
compliance police, right? You pay us and that's it, right? There was a, a sales leader who recently said to an HR leader I'm coaching, he said, look, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to your HR people. If I'm talking to you, there's something wrong. So your job is to pay my people to make sure they get their benefits, etc. I will come talk to you when I want to hire or fire someone. And so some of this is self-inflicted because we as a profession have not done ourselves many favors, but a lot of it is also CEOs and leaders not understanding what good HR looks like and what they should expect from their HR teams. And I think not only should they expect HR teams to innovate, they should create the time and the space and the psychological safety for HR to innovate. It's what happened at IBM, right? The CEO and the rest of the leadership team were supportive while the HR team was experimenting with this really radical change. I don't know that it would have gone over that well in most organizations.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're 100% right. And every time I have an HR team which is, like not high on the readiness and maturity for AI transformation, I always suggest that you start with your own house first. If you have done the work of AI transformation within your capability, HR as a capability, you have the lived experience under your belt, you have the vocabulary you need, and you have, you figured out where you can go wrong, what are the risks, and how to mitigate those risks. So you're better suited to help the rest of the organization with its transformation. Because that's a very I think that's one piece that we, sometimes miss line of sight on, that transformation has to happen both within HR, and HR needs to have the seat at the table to support organizational transformation. Otherwise, if HR is not in the mix for organizational transformation, then this will be looked at as an engineering problem, and HR will be invited back, but then it'll be too late in the game and they'll be back in damage control territory again, which is not an innovation territory, which is like, let me just plug the holes in the leaky boat so we don't drown. So we want to avoid that.
I couldn't agree more. I
And
completely agree. I I think another risk is, and both HR leaders and other non-HR leaders in business, I think, experience this, is thinking of AI as the magic bullet or the one-dimensional fix that is going to solve everything. And that is why your 3A framework is so powerful, because we know now from, there was a report that came out from Deloitte just maybe last month or a couple of months ago. It's called the 2026 Human Capital Trends Report. Anyway, they talk in that report about how when organizations redesign work, so your adapt model, they see much more ROI from their AI transformation than they do when they bolt AI on top of legacy operating models and legacy ways of working. So there is a real business case to be made here. It's about business impact, not about let's bring in AI and check the box and say that we are now an AI powered shop.
that's right. And that's where I've noticed a lot of companies are HR. When I say companies, I'm specifically thinking and talking about HR teams, because when HR is thinking about AI integration, yes, we need to fix our own house first, but also not fix our own house with the sense that I need recruitment to be faster, or I want engagement to be faster, or I want my life to be easier. The moment HR goes to the CFO, CEO with the story of, if we buy this particular tool, it makes my life easier so I can turn around things faster, I doubt that they are going to get the support and buy-in and the budget to implement a new tool or a new process or a new way of working or integrating AI. We have to be so well versed, coming back to your earlier point around where is the business going, what are their current pain points, and anchoring what we do in HR to their problems. Make it the business, it has to be the business's problem. HR exists to solve businesses' problems, not to make our own lives easier, which is where I feel like not every team is thinking like that today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I have a lived experience even on that front, because I'll take talent mobility. internal talent mobility as an example. So there's this company who wanted to implement talent mobility, but first of all, traditionally, talent mobility is seen as a retention tool for most organizations that, hey, people are leaving. If we have internal mobility, we'll be able to show people the next best path within the organization. But not all companies buy that argument. Imagine investing $500,000 in an internal mobility platform in an organization just so that we can have better retention, employee retention. That argument doesn't always fly. But now imagine if HR goes to the business and says, hey, we feel like talent discovery is an issue on your side, and you have to assemble and disassemble and reassemble teams really quickly. And the only way you can look at talent in your organization from a business leader standpoint is through org chart, or you have to go to talk to 10 different people to find that those 5 people who you want to assemble together as a team. What if we make that talent discovery time go from like 7 weeks to 5 days? And this is the investment I'm looking for, because this is how much money you will save, not just in the time shrunk from 7 weeks to 5 days, but also the quality of talent. You'll have the right people doing the right pieces of work at the right time. Imagine the benefit to the organization. Which story would you think would land better with the decision makers? My opinion is, of course, if I position it as a business problem.
Absolutely. And I would even go so far as to quantify how much the turnover is costing us and how it's affecting EBITDA. Because when you're talking to your CEO and your CFO, especially these days, capital efficiency is top of mind for almost every CEO and CFO. We are no longer in an environment of growth for growth's sake. And profitable and sustainable growth are more important now than ever. And so tying in this case, the retention issue to EBITDA, I think would be super impactful. And on the other hand, the discovery of the talent, tying that to the strategic objectives of the business, right? So if we don't have the right skills at the right time, solving the right problems for our customers and serving our customers in the best way possible, and if we don't have the right skills to go and expand in this other area and go and acquire companies and increase our organic growth, et cetera, then that has a real business impact. So I would try to quantify the cost and the impact on EBITDA, and I would try to make the connection between talent discoverability and the actual strategic objectives of the organization, right? Like, we're not going to be able to do these 3 things that you, CEO, want to do, that you've outlined that you want to do in your strategic plan, in your long range plan, if we don't fix this skills and talent discovery issue.
Yep. I love that, because again, finding out the cost of attrition, it's not hard for HR. Like we can easily find out the numbers. And if we go with just that cost argument, that most likely will not fly by itself unless we've tied it to how does it make a difference to the business? What are the things that you can and cannot do?
Yes, that's why
Most,
both are important.
yeah, yeah. So let's pick another example, Malvika. Performance. Performance management, in my opinion, is ripe for disruption with AI. But that's going to be a very tricky one for organizations to dismantle and adopt into performance management process, because, I mean, there are many things tied to it, but a couple that I want to talk about are compensation and promotion. So those are very sensitive pieces for HR to navigate, for the business to even navigate, for employees to even navigate. So, how, from your perspective, I know we don't have to figure out the full solution, but I would love to hear from your perspective if an organization feels like, yes, they need to transform their performance management system from a CHRO's lens. Where would you see would be the biggest bottlenecks, and how would a CHRO and their team go about navigating that landscape to support transformation? Because it has to be transformed.
So if an organization wants to rethink or redesign how they do performance management, I would come back to where we started this conversation, which is what business problem are you trying to solve? And I would make the connection between performance management and the performance of the business. Because ultimately, why does performance management exist? It's to help us manage performance at the individual and team level, yes. But ultimately, what is that doing? It's helping us manage and enhance the performance of the organization better. And the reason I'm pausing on that point is as HR leaders, sometimes we get really, when we talk about performance management, we get really bogged down by the process debt that we've created, by the forms and the reviews and the annual review and the mid-year review and the check-ins and the designing a really crisp and clear process and supporting people through that process is incredibly important. I'm not arguing that at all. But I think first it's important to help people understand and yourself as the HR function understand, why are we even doing performance management in the first place? So that's where I would start. Now, performance management can be very tricky, as you said. It can be politically dangerous. It can
Mhm.
also be dangerous from a regulatory and risk perspective. And so often the result is going to be pushback and a lot of caution, especially if you are in an organization that is extremely risk averse. And
Mhm.
so you may see that leaders are much more receptive to the basic automate or augment cases, like using AI to summarize performance feedback from key themes throughout the year, using AI to coach leaders to have difficult conversations. But coming back to your two use cases, you talked about compensation and promotions. Compensation is an interesting one because in the past, as a CHRO, when I started a compensation project, it would take anywhere between 6 to 12 months. It was a really long, grueling process, and it does take a lot of time and effort from the business as well, because often you're having them review things, you're negotiating with them about how to classify people, because how you classify people in your job architecture is going to determine how they get paid and when they get promoted, et cetera, et cetera. It can become an incredibly expensive process from a time and effort perspective, not just from a financial investment perspective. That was the past. But now with AI tools, you have access to much more real time compensation information, which means let's unpack what that means from a business perspective. It means it improves our ability to acquire top talent because now we can be more competitive in real time. Because in the past, think about when your compensation data would come out through these surveys, and by the time you analyze the data, you were already 6 to 12 months behind. And so if you were in a geography with high inflation, or if you were in a geography where you have talent supply constraints, it was really, really difficult. And so now you have more real time data. And so it makes you more competitive in the talent market. It improves your ability to retain people. And again, those things are having a direct impact on the business's ability to move forward and to deliver on real business objectives. So I would make that connection if I was working on compensation. And I would make the connection between, we were taking this much time in the past and this is what it was costing us. Now we can take this much time and this is how much it will save us. And not only will it save us, going back to our earlier point, this is how it will impact our ability to deliver better outcomes as a business. And then on the promotions point, I feel like that one is a little bit more tricky. I would think about how you want to use AI. So obviously you're not going to use AI in a deterministic way, right? Because you shouldn't. So you shouldn't be having AI tell you these people should be promoted and these people shouldn't. What you might do is have AI use AI in a probabilistic way. But if you're going to use it in a probabilistic way, how are you going to use it? So are you going to use it, for example, like we use AI in recruiting, where an AI tool tells you, based on this resume and this job description, this candidate has a 76% chance of succeeding in this role. And so if you're going to use it in that way, again, the black box approach doesn't work, because even if you are not making the decision to promote someone or not promote someone using AI, you are still making a decision using AI. And so even that decision needs to have some transparency and explainability behind it.
Yeah.
And importantly, it cannot be the only output in the process or the only decision making fact or the only data point. You need to look at various data points, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes very tricky to look at various data points when you have a machine or an algorithm telling you this person has a 76% chance of succeeding if you promote them into this role, right? Who is going to be the person in the room raising their hand and disagreeing with the recommendation of the AI? Who is going to be the adult in the room questioning the manager who wants to promote the person? And by the way, there's also a regulatory angle here. So if you have a global business and you look at the EU AI Act, for example, under the EU AI Act, they categorize these types of people decisions, hiring, firing, promotions, etc., as high risk decisions. And so they want you to explain how these decisions are made. They want you to be able to be transparent and share with people what data was used, how was it used, how did the AI arrive at those outcomes, and you need to be able to demonstrate that they're not discriminatory. And so on the promotion piece, don't know that we are there yet, but I feel like compensation could be a really interesting use case.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact that you brought up the point that different data signals have to be connected together, even for AI to make the recommendation. And again, human judgment still exists in agreeing or disagreeing to AI. But this point speaks to the complexity of redesign as well. If we think about bolting AI into the promotion decision making process, you need to have your data anatomy really, really clean and cleared out before you even start feeding any data into AI so that it can build its own recommendation engine. Right now, the data anatomy for human data in an organization is very fragmented, is all over the place. I mean, I have witnessed organizations debating headcount numbers, like something that should be, like a no brainer, and it is a table stake data point, but yet a report generated by finance will have a different headcount number versus a report generated by HR because they both departments have classified headcount differently. That's the reality that we are dealing with. So to have AI make a recommendation when data is so broken behind the scenes is not going to give us a good value. So we need to have clean data pipes. We need to decide on what data needs to be fed into AI. Is the data clean? If it's not clean, what data pipes do we need to have in place so that it's fed and trained with the right data? And then what data pieces are we choosing to connect? Are we choosing to connect an employee's personality, their aspirations, their previous work experience, linking it to their OKRs and the outcomes that they've achieved? Like all of that decision making needs to happen. And once all of that has been ironed out, I'm just kind of playing the scenario in my head because I've witnessed in many organizations when time to actually have a promotion conversation, a team will sit at the round table and everybody's pitching their person for promotion. And then, of course, there are people who are saying, yay, nay, I agree, I support, I don't support. And that conversation still happens today. Now, in a future state, AI might be the one pitching a person for a promotion and not, but the humans still are at the table, even challenging AI. And AI is not just like a passive dashboard that's sitting. AI is also, like now we've all experienced chatbot. You can go back and forth with AI. You can always go and say, you're saying that it's 75% chance of probability of this person succeeding, but tell me why or what can be done to make their chance of success in that particular role increase. Is it the leader that they are going to report to, or is it the work that they have to do? So you can do so much further diagnosis and investigation before those decisions are made. So I feel like I just wanted to paint a picture of when done right, imagine the potential and possibility it opens up versus what we are doing today when we are making promotion decisions.
Absolutely. And by the way, it's not like we talk about bias in AI, right? It's not like we are unbiased
Yeah.
as humans, right? And you would be surprised by how many people don't trust their human leaders to make fair and unbiased decisions. Gartner did this survey where they asked people to respond to the statement, I trust an AI algorithm to give me fairer feedback than my current manager. And only 13% of the respondents disagreed with that statement. 50% were neutral, and a third outright agreed. And I don't know that that's some kind of enthusiasm for the AI, but it does demonstrate how much of a trust deficit there is between managers and their direct reports, right? And so if we use AI probabilistic, not deterministic, as an additional data point in these types of decisions and these processes. And by the way, we use AI as a challenger.
Yeah.
So there's no one AI personality, right? At the beginning of the process, you can use AI as an analyst that is giving a recommendation. That's the recommendation where it says this person has a 76% chance of succeeding in this role if you promote them. Well, then in the next phase of the process, you can use the AI as a challenger, right? To say, why would this not work? Under what circumstances would this person not be successful in this role? Or what would make me question this 76% chance? Or what about this process could be questioned as being unfair or biased, etc. And so you can use the AI in different ways throughout the process to pressure test your own decisions. And by the way, to your point, which is a really important point, it's not like you're removing humans from the equation entirely. In fact, I think the best organizations that are at the cutting edge, not only do they have diverse AI councils, so you have HR people, legal, product, sales, etc., represented in your AI council or AI steering committee, whatever you call it, the committee that comes together to set the direction for how we're going to approach AI as an organization. But those cutting edge organizations also have another thing in common, which is they bring employees in from diverse parts of the business to pressure test these experiments and tools before they roll them out, so that you are incorporating diverse perspectives and asking people, look, this is what we want to experiment with. Poke holes in it. Tell us what could go wrong, or tell us from your perspective how this might be viewed. Do you think it might be viewed as biased or unfair or what have you? And then you can make changes from there, right? So it's important to have those diverse perspectives so that you are treating AI as the cross-functional endeavor that it is, and not sitting in your little HR silo and saying, this is the AI tool that we're going to use to determine people's compensation and promotions.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not going to go over well in any situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know we can continue having this conversation for another hour. I say that with you every single conversation. We should do part 2 of this conversation.
Yes.
We definitely should, because we just got warmed up into now solutioning. But again, I want to recap our conversation so far that one, it is not an HR problem, it's a business problem. So start framing the work that you need to do in HR and linking it back to what matters most to the business. AI doesn't come in one flavor. There are many flavors of AI. So you can use the 3A thinking lens, or you might have your own way of looking at AI and where and how it adds value. But don't bolt AI onto a broken process, because you'll end up having faster horses and the market would demand a car. So we don't want to be in that situation. Now, the third piece I want you to help me wrap up this conversation with is that if somebody who's feeling inspired after listening to our conversation today and wants to start on an AI transformation journey in their HR team, what would you recommend to them as their starting point? Where should they start, and how should they think about HR transformation with AI?
So you're talking about specifically transforming the HR function. Is that correct?
Yes.
I think a smart place to begin would be a really focused pilot in either recruiting or L&D if you have needs in those areas, or if you have needs in those areas. And I say recruiting and L&D because those are two areas that are typically data rich, they are well understood, and you can demonstrate some quick wins. And I say data rich because often you need AI ready data and documentation to be able to deploy AI successfully, especially agentic AI. That was our whole context graphs conversation, right? And well understood because these are typically areas where the business has a lot of need and they also understand what good looks like, and you can show quick wins. And those quick wins are really important for CHROs from a political and social capital perspective, because we are not necessarily in a time where HR has the highest political and social capital and trust from employees. And so, for example, companies will start on the recruiting side using AI for candidate outreach or for resume screening, as we've talked about, or for creating interview guides or training managers on what good interviewing looks like, and even onboarding. I worked with an organization last year where they were going through a hyper growth phase and they were hiring a lot of people. And every 2 weeks, they had new hire orientation. And for the new hire orientation, what they would do is they would bring in the VPs or the heads of all of the key departments like product, sales, HR, et cetera. And each VP would give a presentation to the new hires about what their team works on and how to engage with them. And they were doing this every 2 weeks, all of the VPs. So you can imagine how expensive those new hire orientations are, right? You're bringing in all these leaders from the organization. These are very highly paid leaders. And so what we did is we created AI avatars of these VPs and we just fed their presentations into the AI avatars. And now the new hires listen to the AI avatars. Now, importantly, it's not like we removed the human touch and the human connection. The new hires still meet with the VPs and the heads of each department, but now it's more of a dialogue. After they've already seen the AI avatar presentation and they've already understood what do you, VP of product, work on, now they can ask you meaningful questions and you can have a back and forth and a real conversation versus the VP of product talking at the new hires every 2 weeks, right? And so that was a great example of using AI for onboarding. We also, you and I both were on a virtual event with an L&D company recently, right? Where they create AI agents to help with everything from content creation to identifying skills and skills gaps and getting your workforce ready for the future and acquiring new skills. And so that's why I say recruiting and L&D, because those are two areas where you can show immediate wins and earn some of that trust to create bigger and bolder experiments in the future.
I love it. And I love the fact that you didn't jump to buy a recruitment platform or an L&D platform. And you gave real tangible examples of how do we redesign and rethink the learning and recruitment experiences, both from the ground up. So thank you for that. So as we wrap up our conversation today, one last question for you. A year from now, what does the CHRO who gets this right look like? And what did they do differently from everyone else?
I think the CHRO who got it right will be seen as a leader of a more agile HR function and a more data informed and therefore intelligent HR function. They will also be a CHRO who has routinized change within their organization. And so what I mean by that is there was a Gartner report that came out earlier this year on the 2026 CHRO priorities. And in it, one of the things that they talk about is we are no longer in an era of episodic change where you pull out your change management playbook, once a year or once every couple of years. We are now in a state of constant change. And by the way, the volume and pace of change will only continue to accelerate in the future. And so I think a CHR who got this right will have really reflected on that and incorporated change and building of and flexing of the change management muscle into the day-to-day work. And the last thing I will say is, I think a great and highly effective CHRO is one who is going to work on meta learning as a skill, meaning learning how to learn.
Mhm.
Many of us stopped our formal education when we left college or university. And I think one thing that is becoming clear to all of us is that we are now in an age where we constantly have to learn new things, learn new skills, and that will help us drive better and more effective business outcomes. So that's what I think about what a successful and effective CHRO will look like a year from now.
Fantastic. What a beautiful note to end our conversation on today. So thank you, Malvika. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. These are so fun. Thanks always for having me.
Absolutely. And we'll do another one after
Of
this.
course. Happy to.
Yeah. And I'm sure there is a version of this conversation that ends with a tidy framework and a 3-step plan, but that's not what we gave you today, and that was intentional. What Malvika and I kept coming back to is that the leaders who are getting this right are not the ones with the biggest AI budgets or the most sophisticated AI tools. They are the ones who are asking harder questions about the work itself. Not how do I make this process faster, but should this process exist in its current form at all? And that is the architect question. And it is an uncomfortable one, and it's worth sitting with. And if today's conversation sparked something for you, I would love to hear more about what that was. You can find me on LinkedIn and on Instagram, and we are also on Substack. And you can find Malvika at atvisgroup.com and on LinkedIn. And if you're a founder, a CEO, or a CHRO navigating a genuine people transformation, she's definitely someone worth talking to. Thank you for listening to Tides.